Okay, this is about methods. I'll try to keep the terminology down to as little different word as explanations as I can. So we have a form and we have 3 buttons. They're all called objects. Think of this as if you had a form laying on your desk and you had 3 buttons laying on your desk, those would be objects. So we have an object of a form and we have 3 buttons that we laid on top of the form. We have 4 objects. Now we have buttons and we want them to do something. So I'm going to call this, we're going to call up or invoke an action. I'm going to try to be consistent on my words. And again, this is about methods. So a method is, I'm going to use the word container. A container is as you know, is like a jar that you put something in. In this case, in this video, we're going to call the container, we're going to use the container to put in blocks of code. We're going to encapsulate the blocks of code into the container to be reused, and we're going to call that a method. So to clarify that a little bit more, let's say that we wanted to, let's think of it as tools. So you're going to work on your car and you have a certain tool and you put it in a jar to reuse. That's what blocks of code are. They're tools to reuse, that in simplified terms. So here we have a container full of code, and here we have another container full of code. Now these are called methods because they can be reused. They don't have to be, they're not specific to any object, but they can be reused to all the objects. Or to, if we got to the car terminology, we could use the method on any car, the tool on any car within this program, if this was a huge program. So these parentheses, think of these as the containers that are holding your tools. They contain the method or the tool that you're going to use on your object. And we'll get into that. The other term we want to use is sub-procedure. There's 5 sub-procedures here. So it starts with the word that says private sub and it says end sub. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 blocks of code. There's 5 sub-procedures. 2 of these sub-procedures are methods. Methods, again, we're going to think of them as containers of code. And the reason we know these are methods and not attached to an object, which is a button, is because if you look closely, you'll see that this specifically says this is attached to button 1. This says button 2. This says button 3. So we're taking this method, this tool, to simplify this, and we're going to reuse it, and we're going to reuse this when we do our button click event. They call it an event. It's kind of like an event is like going to a show. That's an event. So clicking the button is going to the show. That's the event. So all this code is encapsulated, and this is important to learn. This is hard for me to grasp, and I don't see many people explaining it. But you notice there's the parentheses here, and there's parentheses all over. There's parentheses here. This is encapsulated code. The other information next to it is, we're not going to go into all of it, but this, for instance, is a name. This is a tool or a container of code, and this is saying, if we use the tool analogy, this is how we're going to handle that tool. And we're not going to get into that in this video. So we'll go over a little bit a few other things. I have to assume you know a little bit, but I'll go over it real quick. We're making 4 containers to start. The container 1 is called A, B, C, D container. Remember, in the end, these little containers are going to be put into one big container, and this big container is going to be then called a method. And beyond that, a method is a block of code, and a block of code is a sub-procedure. So getting back to this, we have 4 baby containers. In these 4 containers, we're going to first, in this one we're going to put in 3.34, and the second container we're going to put in 6.32, and the third container we're going to put these 2 containers inside, A plus B, so we're adding these 2 together. So now these 2 containers are inside this 1 container. So really that's 3 containers. To skip ahead, those 2 containers are in C, so that is encapsulated now inside here. That's C. The 4th container is D. We're giving it a value. These are values of a text. And it's going to say test. So we're adding 2 containers together. Even though it's one block of code, there's different pieces to that code. In this case, it's C and D. Down here, the second method, and dim means remember, but we have 1 container. This 1 container, all it's going to have in it is some text that we're going to put inside, and it's going to say, does this work? And then the way we're going to show that information is we're going to use a message box dot show. It's another video, but again, you notice it's encapsulated. So you need to think, whenever you see a procedure like this, a block of code, a method, these are the keys, these parentheses. So just to go over this right now, real quick, all this is encapsulated. All this is in there. This is in there. And this is that. They're all more or less tied together. And this is a separate block of code that we're reusing from a method up here. Let's run the program. So button 1. We're going to invoke an action. Basically, we're going to call up containers of code. So we're calling up a container of code, and this container is this method, which has this values of C and D. I think we went over that. And then it's calling up, if we click it again, now we're calling up this other method, and this method container, which has a value of hello. The value is, does this work? That's the name of the container. And then we have a second So that's one block of code. You can see it. And we have the other. This is a method. We're in a block of code, in a method of code, but we're going to call up another method from this method. So we're going to click it again. Again, the code is working. The computer reads down. It's kind of like reading a book. You read down. So now the second one, we called it this method. We got this container of information, which is, again, these are tied together. So this is C and D in here and in there. They're all tied together. So we're reusing that. So we were on that button. We were grabbing this information and that information. Now we're going down to button 2. We want to grab this, or we want to, again, I'm trying not to use too many terms. We're going to call up this information in this container, and this container is that method up above. So in this button, we're only going to call up one method or one bucket of information or one container of information. So if you remember test 1, all these little containers are fit into this container. So test 1, we're going to call it C and D. C and D is A plus B and test. So when we click this, there's only one procedure here. So that's all we should see. We should see I'm just adding these up, 966 and test. So C is 9.66, test is D. Button 2, I guess we just did button 2, so let's go down to button 3. Maybe I missed it, but you're getting the point. So this video doesn't get too long. Button 3. So now we're going to, let me drag this out of here. Get more code on the page. Need a bigger screen, I guess. Okay, so in this case, we do not have any containers of code that we've made. We're reusing methods of these two methods, and by the way, they're out of order. This time we're going to call method 2 first, and we're going to call method 1 first. So method 2, we know, is that it's going to, inside this container is going to be this value does work, and then we're also, as code reads down, we're going to call up the second method, which is C and D. So it's going to do this and this. On button 3. Okay, you notice it went through 3 times. So the reason it went through 3 times is, and I try to make this real clear really quick, is test 2, method 2, has 2 containers of information. One specific to this method, but then we're also added this first method into this method. We're reusing this method inside the other method. So we're adding the container of code here into the second method. You can mix the methods up. You can add methods to methods. So you could go on and on and on. And in the end, I did a close. A close, again, is another container that is a Microsoft container that invokes a close. So we'll do that real quick, and then I'll be done. Notice that the button 1 and 2 didn't close, but button 3 is closing because I put a close down here. So 1, 2, 3. And that's it.